Have you ever had that feeling that something was following you? Just that incredible sense of dread that there's something lurking right behind you. Something that's going to do things you fear the most if it catches you. The hairs stand up on the back of your neck, and the cold shivers run all the way up from the base of your spine, and you can't help but turn around. And when you do, there's nothing there. And then you have that wave of relief wash over you, and you have to laugh at how stupid it was to feel the way you did just a few seconds prior. Everyone has that feeling once in a while. But sometimes, if you pay close attention, you'll notice that it's not a stupid feeling. Sometimes, if you really pay attention, you'll actually see that you really are being followed. And when you do finally notice it, it'll be too late. I was leaving work one night. My schedule had been staggered for the night, and instead of leaving at 11 p.m. like the rest of the people here, I was getting out later at 12:30. My friends each mocked me as they left, telling me not to forget to lock up. I left the building and walked towards my car when that feeling hit me. The parking lot was completely vacant, since everyone else had already left for the night. The whole area was completely silent, aside from the buzzing of the street lamps which hummed overhead. I think it was the lack of sound that caused that sensation of fear more than the lack of people. But whatever it was, I kicked myself for being childish and made my way to my car. As I walked, the feeling became too much, and I found myself spinning on my heels to check behind me. Nothing. I sighed and rubbed my eyes, but in that momentary haze where my blurred vision was clearing up, something on the ground looked distorted, unnatural. The shadows of the few cars remaining in the parking lot appeared to be crawling towards me. After staring in disbelief for a moment, I realized that the buzzing I had heard earlier wasn't coming from the lamps. The shadows that crept along the ground towards me were emitting that noise. I slowly walked towards my car, keeping my disbelieving gaze upon those shadows. Suddenly, one of the shadows reached out. Like a snake, the tendril wrapped around my foot. I felt a wave of pain shoot throughout my body. Instinctively, I jumped back and kicked my foot wildly. In that motion, I freed myself and sprinted the rest of the way to my car. Jumping inside and starting it, I couldn't help but think about all the questions rising in my mind. What were they? What do they want? Are they going to kill me? Just then, I glanced out of my window and saw something strange. In the midst of the shadows crawling across the parking lot, a face in the darkness, haunting, smiling. Immediately, I drove out of the parking lot as fast as I could. I could feel myself starting to panic at that point. Sweat began to bead along my forehead. My foot no longer hurt, but that didn't stop me from remembering the pain. As if my foot were burning and freezing at the same time. A feeling like 1,000 needles puncturing my flesh. I didn't want to feel that again. After pulling onto the main road, I took the time to try and calm myself. I tried desperately to convince myself that it was all just a hallucination, brought on by fatigue from overworking. But that's when I noticed something else. As I was driving through town, I watched as the shadows cast from the buildings around me began to peel off the buildings like paint. They were following me. I knew I was in trouble. I floored the gas pedal as hard as I could. My car shook as I raced down the road. In my rear view, I watched as the shadows trailed farther and farther behind. I knew it wasn't over yet. I still had 20 more miles to make it home. I turned on my high beams in a vain attempt to keep the shadows at bay. The streetlights behind me started going out one after another as I passed by them. As I drove, I passed by the factory, which marked the halfway point between my work and my house. A police officer was waiting nearby. At my current rate, the officer turned on his lights and pulled out behind me. For a brief moment, a sense of safety and security built within me. However, that was quickly stripped away as I watched the lights fade in the distance. Upon seeing that, I pressed my foot harder into the floor. I tore down the highway at frightening speed, but finally made it to my city. I was almost home now, and I thought the lights of the city would be enough to keep the shadows away, or at the very least, slow them down. Once again, I looked behind me and saw that building after building, house after house, were slowly getting absorbed into the darkness. I flew through town, running red lights and disregarding all other traffic as the building lights and street lamps were disappearing one by one. I made it to my road, and I knew that this was going to be the last chance I had. I had a gauntlet to run on a narrow, curvy, hilly road, with a lack of lights since everyone would already be in bed. But, right across from my place, was a lamp that always shined brightly. My panicked reasoning led me to believe that the lamp would save me somehow. All I had to do was make it home. The buzz of the shadows were deafening now. They were on top of me. My headlights flickered as my windows went black. I knew it was over. I had lost. But suddenly, the shadows faded, and I could see that lamp rapidly growing in the distance. I had made it. I pulled into my driveway and parked my car, sitting for a brief moment to catch my breath and wipe the sweat from my face. After a moment, I stumbled into my house, walked straight to my bedroom, and fell face first onto my bed. I closed my eyes as I felt my body begin to relax. I cracked my eyes just before I fell asleep, and I stared at a face looking at me from the shadows in my closet. The last thing I remember was hearing a buzz and seeing nothing but darkness. So remember, when you get that feeling that you're being followed and the hairs stand up on the back of your neck, don't turn around. You don't want to know what's following you. Because it's not that we want to hurt you or torture you. We just want you. We want to take you, and we won't stop until we find you.